The only real hope and change you'll ever get is from God. It's going to come from the Lord, or it's not going to come at all. It's going to come when you admit that you can't do it and that you've got to have His help.
I have this nagging feeling we're going into a fast period. We're going to have to be vigilant on all sides. Please do not become nervous. Don't do that. Your Father is in charge, always. He is. And you are His children, His beloved. Remember that. But I want you guys to know about the earth. Well, everybody is. We have some things happening. The earth is also doing something quite strange. And I'd like you guys to know about that, about the earth. So that means get ready so that you guys understand what a geomagnetic reversal actually is. You guys ready for that? You guys understand the elements in a forecast. You already know about the percentages of rain and what that means. You do. So you know that forecast. There's a whole nother forecast I want you guys to be aware of. And you may not know some of this, so maybe it will refresh your memory. So I'm going to begin with how it works, right? How it works, how the Earth's magnetic field actually works. Now, keep in mind, this is theorized. All of it's theorized. Do they know for a fact? No, it's mathematically theorized from the best set of data params that have been gathered over time that are public. Right? Not going over non-public things. Can't do that. That would throw everybody all the way off. So we won't do that. But you can know things within the scope of what is public and published and peer-reviewed. The core of the Earth. It is thought that the fluid motions within the Earth, composed of iron, mainly composed of iron. The Earth's core is thought to be composed of iron. I'll let you know where they get this from later on. Is surrounded by a fluid motion, very hot fluid, right? This creates a type of buoyancy. So we have the iron core in the middle, right? Condensing, constantly condensing, slowly cooling, condensing into a solid, helping the inner core stay solid. The rotation of the Earth is responsible for this iron core to be suspended the way it is. It is directly relatable to that. Simulations have proven that, by the way. This motion creates a magnetic field that just, it twists all over the planet. 99% of the magnetic energy of the Earth is confined within the core. Now just think about that. 99% of the Earth's magnetic energy, right? All that potential is bound or confined within the core. That means you're only experiencing 1% of that power. We're going to call it power. You're only experiencing 1% of that power. Nobody has experienced anything beyond that. It's enough to keep the moon where it is, right? It acts, it's a little complex, but it keeps the moon where it is. It keeps solar energy in check. Without that 1%, all of us would burn right now. Without 1%, right? Without that 1%. So that's incredibly weak compared to the core of the planet. But we have a problem. For a long time, we've been operating by that little tiny 1%. And it's been enough to redirect the strongest of solar flares. Think about that. 1% redirects a solar flare. By way of interaction, radiation follows magnetic lines of force. So just think about that. 99% of that potential is inside the Earth. You're not exposed to that. You are exposed to that remaining 1%, which is divided between the surface of the Earth and, of course, deep in space. It extends way out there, right? So this is let's call that a dipole, part of the dipole effect, which, by the way, is like a bar magnet. Each end of a bar magnet is magnetized a different way. The lines of force, they look the same, right? But they attract different things. A dipole is like a battery. One side is negative, one side is positive. It's like two glasses. One side is full, one side is empty. So the full side cannot take water, but the empty side can. See, it's different. This structure, this dipole type structure, is aligned with the Earth's magnetic, or its rotation, not its magnetic rotation, but its rotation, right? So essentially, we're like a big bar magnet. Based on the axes of the Earth, you have magnetic field lines at the top going around the center, and at the bottom going around the center. See that? A bar, you guys are familiar with a bar magnet. It looks like a bar. It has north and south written on it. On that magnet, normally colors of blue and red. So the Earth is like that, and the bar is orientated with the axis. So just think of it that way. Think of it that way. That's how, compasses work, and all these old devices that we have, we can somewhat calibrate things by them. And of course, there's the issue with this though. This dipole part of the field reverses, and that's what causes the locations of the north and the south magnetic poles to switch. It reverses. Okay, they do reverse. So you understand that, right? So that means at some point, the North Pole is going to be the South Pole, and the South Pole is going to be the North Pole by way of that dipole effect. So the North Pole will not be the North Pole anymore. It's going to be the South Pole. And at that time, they have devices set up, right? They're set up for this, but some things are not. So that's going to be a problem all within itself. They have already checked this. Looking at the ocean floor for lava flows to track some of the orientation of the iron in those lava flows, to see how often this process happens. How often do the poles reverse of the Earth, right? It is thought, for example, the sun. The sun's fields, they reverse every 11 years. Very important number. 11 years. Very important. Every 11 years, the sun reverses. Now, as far as the Earth is concerned, the Earth has a variable orientation change, you could say. It is thought, and this is theorized. Some of it's theorized. Some of it's fact. They have found with the lava flows, it's been as short as 10,000 years. And of course, they have theorized as long as 25 million years. So somewhere between there, we're going to have reversals. We know we have had quite a bit, right? It is also theorized that it takes about 5,000 years for this reversal to happen. So it's not like overnight. It does not reverse overnight. This is theorized. This is very important. This is what they have theorized. Do they know this factually? No, they do not. It's theorized. And I'm saying it's theorized so you understand something. That often in the Bible, we have things mentioned to us in prophecy. And then mankind, they have their science, and in their science, they theorize a lot. But often, well, just about in all cases, their theories are against prophecy. Almost always. So if God says something is going to happen instantly to be a catastrophe upon the earth, science will say, well, it takes 5,000 years, nothing to worry about. If God says this process is going to take a long time, science says, well, it's almost instantaneous. They're always in that opposition view to the Bible. Why? Well, let's go ahead and face it. They're paid by those who prop up Darwin's theory of evolution, not creation. You'll destroy your career if you begin to talk about creation. Too bad, though, because in the future, we're going to go far beyond creation. No one will believe evolution. Not one soul on this planet is going to ever believe in evolution again. In fact, they're going to feel like fools for believing in evolution in the first place. That's a pretty bold statement, and only time can back up what I'm saying. But I'm confident they're going to feel like fools. That's what it seems like they'll be. But, science, they have an answer for that. They'll say, well, in the absence of information and proof, it's the only thing we could theorize. But now that we have extra facts, now we believe it. Trust me, that's what will happen. So no one's going to be vindicated. Because even creationists, in the way they have thought of creation, they're going to be proven wrong too, because creationists often give room to science by not defining the days the Lord has designated. So they won't even do that. They won't do that either. They won't do that either. They just kind of leave that be. Right? I believe what the Lord says. I do not believe what man says. You know how people say, well, the earth is no more than 7,000 years old. Where do they get that from? That's what I want to know. Where do they get that from? Where did they come from? I'd really like someone to tell me where that comes from. I'm bringing this point out to let you know something. Often, there are things that people have not heard. And so when somebody comes out and they say something like that with a little bit of scripture to back it up, because nobody ever said that before, it takes off like wildfire. All of a sudden, people are out there arguing. The earth is no older than 6,000 years old. Where do you get that from? Genesis. Why? Because it flies in the face of science. Then after a time, people begin to reconsider what the Word of God says. They come back down to earth again, where God placed us, and they say, well, maybe we were a bit hasty in our summation of how old the earth is. They do that. Back to the reversal, the magnetic reversal of the earth. That's the poles reversing. Now, the poles reversing have nothing to do with the land masses moving. You guys do know that, right? The North and the South Pole magnetically can change positions. The land masses do not change. Right now, the North and the South Poles are unstable magnetically. But the land masses have not shifted substantially. They have not shifted. We do have some tectonic troubles. We do have some crustal displacement taking place that no one will acknowledge, because that's unthinkable. Tell that to those in Japan. Tell it to them. Tell it to the people in Africa. Tell it to them. Tell it to those who rest on the eastern side of the Eurasian plate. Tell it to those folks on the islands. See what they think. Ask those in Australia. We're going to find out in a few days. Ask them. Ask them. And then again, ask those in South America. Again, ask them again. Maybe a week and a half. Ask them again. Did you guys see that with the dipole? So the sun reverses its poles every 11 years. Right? So we have this solar minimum maximum thing going on. And the earth, it is theorized, it reverses its poles every 10,000 to 25 million years, taking 5,000 years for that process to happen. Now, the process is violent. I'm going to talk to you guys about this process. A reversal. Is it a world destroyer? We don't know. We do know this. All throughout the earth, you see ruined civilization. You see ruins of buildings, ruins of just about everything. And we know that some of those ruins coincide with the dates of theorized reversal. We know that. See, some of the destructive happenings on the earth did not take some external object to slam into the earth. No, didn't happen that way. It happened through lots of fire. How do they know that? From the coal, from the carbon. That's how they know. They also know it through radiation. See, there are certain layers of the earth that have high doses of radiation, which means something messed our atmosphere up. It didn't wipe it away, it messed it up. During the chaotic region of the earth changing its magnetic poles, there's something called there's a chaotic time span. And what that means is the earth no longer has the ability to redirect radiation to the poles. The radiation goes everywhere. Sometimes it's concentrated to the point where it melts glass. It melts sand into glass, a very special glass. Now, there are different types of glass on the planet that is a result of heat, but all of it's known. It leaves a crystallized form behind. You can always tell which ones were caused by anything dealing with the atmosphere of the earth. You can have a comet smash into the earth. You have a specific byproduct of that action. You can have a nuclear bomb go off. There's a specific byproduct of that action. And then you can have radiation from the sun penetrating the atmosphere directly to the surface. And it causes a very specific byproduct. And that byproduct is found multiple times throughout the crust of the earth. Multiple times. So it's not just one layer. It's 50 or 60 layers. See, that's why I believe if it's 50 or 60 layers, and we know that the reversal of the poles is far shorter than 25 million years. So I put that in the hogwash bin. It doesn't happen every 25 million years. We would not have what we have consistent with the sun's interaction on the surface of the earth. The way we have it, up to 50 different layers, 50 plus layers of evidence that states the sun's solar winds touched the surface of the earth more than 50 times. That means throw 25 million years out of the window, because the rock strata this is found in and the layers of the crust this is found in is far too young. Far too young. It's a shame, right? It's a shame with academia. They do not speak plainly. They encode knowledge so that you always need some sort of hidden book to determine what the other books are talking about. That's how they control who's smart and who's not. It's kind of like mathematics, right? You guys learn mathematics. But when you went to college, those of you who did, you found out that in college, you learned the keys to some of the mathematics in, high school algebra, high school trig, high school calculus. It's different than college calculus, college trig, college algebra. Because in college, they share some base formulas, some base theories they do not share in high school. And once you learn those base formulas, you can then begin to apply algebra, calculus, trigonometry, and all these different mathematical disciplines to whatever you're doing. They will not share it any other way. So it's layered for control. Or else they would teach the entirety of mathematics, starting with the root, all of the root, and really building up society to know what they're doing. One day it'll be that way when all the greedy people are gone. When they're dead and gone, they'll be gone. No more greed. When people are not greedy, they have this beautiful ability to make sure that everybody knows what they're doing. And yes, that society is possible. You have to get rid of the greed. The system you live in right now, I give it no praise. I give it zero praise because of the framework of how we're living right now is a control structure. A big prison. It's not a prison planet. Man just made these clever devices and kingdoms and the ways these kingdoms operate to keep people captive and depressed and under full control. It's foolishness. It is foolishness. And with computers, there's no reason with computers that anybody should be starving or hungry or anything else. Do you know that? I'm going to show you guys that COT. Oh, well, side note, for a long time, I've been held back on what I could do in code for COT. Do you know why? Anybody know why? Intellectual property. So imagine if you were trained by an organization, and within that organization, anything that you have learned by way of technology legally, right, belongs to the institution you were contracted with or worked with or took an oath to. So you can't share any of that because you learned it by that institution. So that means anything that you would make in the future would be under the stipulant or stipulations of that same institution. And they could so easily say, well, you must have gotten that from us. Even your own ideas, they could halt you in your tracks. And they could say, that idea came from us. And when you're dealing with intellectual property, what are you going to do? You have no choice but to stop what you're doing and let others review everything in which they can take years. unless God intervenes, unless he puts a halt to it. As it turns out, sometimes what people mean for misfortune to you turns out to be the biggest blessing. Biggest one. As a side note. So never think your misfortune did not put you ahead, because likely it put you ahead. It does. Imagine if you were trained by an institution, and then that institution tried to pull some dirty trick and erase some of your records just to try and distance themselves from you in that area so that you could not be employed in that area. Think of that. Well, if they did that, you can't claim that you know anything on a resume because they would not corroborate what you write down. But here's the good side. If they deny that they had anything to do with you in that area with that specific discipline, then you can say and do anything you want in that area, and they can't do anything about it. Think of that. Think of that. Now, if I was brainless, I'd be in trouble, but that's not how the Lord made me. So if an institution desires to disconnect themselves in a specific area, saying, well, no, there's no record here, well, then guess what? No one can come behind me and say this is ours. They can't do it. You know why? Because there's no record here. They said it. If they say it, there's no record here. They can never come behind me and say this is ours, can they? No, they cannot. See how they just stomp on their own feet? I tell you this, everything the devil means for evil, when it comes to you, God will always get the glory. So don't worry about these complex attacks. Don't worry about those things. Just keep going in the right direction, doing what you can with integrity. The Lord works out the details. He didn't ask us to work out the details. He just told us to come follow me. That's what he said, come follow me. So follow him all the way. Never stop. He'll work out the details. Anyway, so back to the earth again. So we have those reversals. Now, the outer core of the earth maintains the magnetic field lines. The outer core of the earth is full of hot stuff, right? Magma, all that. So long as we have a pretty consistent magnetic field, we know that the lava flow or the fluid dynamics in motion inside the planet is somewhat stable. Now, no one's going to go down there in a boat, a submarine. You're not doing that, but it is somewhat consistent and stable. If we begin to detect fluctuations in the magnetic field lines of force, that means the fluid dynamics on the inside of the planet is no longer consistent. It's not consistent. See, there were some guys who created a three-dimensional computer simulation of the geodynamo. Right? They created this. Roberts and University of California, I believe, Los Angeles, back in the 90s. Okay, so they made a program, and they developed a bunch of subroutines that would handle the mathematics that simulate the core of the Earth, magnetic field lines, all that stuff. And they could actually study how these different mechanisms within the Earth and the rotation of the Earth and the axis of the Earth and magnetic field lines, how that all operates together. So the simulation yielded quite a few things. Number one, it showed us that we can have spontaneous reversals. And what that means is, and it's very consistent with the 50 plus layers in the Earth that show that our current orientation had flipped or changed many different times. It showed them that you can have something called spontaneous reversals. Spontaneous reversals. And that means there's no indication of a reversal, something that happens. Right? Just something that happens. But that can happen through slight pressure building up into big pressure, causing bigger changes in the magnetic field lines and the rotation of the fluid in the Earth. They know it happens. In fact, I believe that we're undergoing a process right now where that's happening. The simulation is what they base information off of today. So it was a good simulation. It was a very good one, and is a very good one. So then the reversal process is not some seasonal thing. It's a random thing. Stochastic reversals, which means random. It's a big word that means random. It just means random. So it can happen at any time. So what are the indications? It would be good of us to know what the indications of that reversal would be. Well, one of the indications is the abnormality of the sun, because the sun's abnormality is going to affect the dynamics in the earth. How so, you ask? If the sun is a big giant motor or an engine, and the earth is a tiny engine that uses the magnetic forces of the bigger engine, then any changes in the big engine will affect the tinier engine by way of solar winds. Think of it this way: the solar winds are the chain on your bicycle, right, with sprockets in it. And if the sun alters, the sprockets are going to move at different speeds, which will affect the earth. Think of it that way. So changes in the sun will lead to changes in the earth. Have we had changes in the sun? Just by way of your observations. Have we had some changes in the sun? I say that we have. I say that we have. Big time. Have we had increased earthquakes? And not just any earthquakes, larger earthquakes. Have we had some sort of increase? I'd say we have. And do they always follow strange activity from the sun? I'd say yes again. Yes again. So that means we have some sort of a process taking place, initialized, because something is affecting the sun. But the main part here is that when the sun begins to change, so will we. We're not alone, so will the other planets. We're not by ourselves. Now, think of it this way. We have this floating shell on top of magma. The floating shell are the continents and the ocean floor, right? Because the earth, listen to me, don't think of the earth. If you take all the water away from earth, will the land masses fall to the bottom? No, they will not. If you were to take a ball of clay, I'm going to show you how the earth is made, very simply so you understand this. This is a concept. Believe it or not, people do not understand it. They don't. So if you were to take a ball of clay and smash your fingers into it, where you have these deep craters in that clay, and somehow you were able to fill up each crater with some water, those would be the oceans of the earth. But the land masses are simply the parts of the ball that are showing. And the ocean is part of the ball that's not showing, is covered by water. Okay? So if you take all the water away, the earth is one big solid ball. That means the continents are not floating on top. You know that Pangea, how they represent, they say that earth was one big landmass. The only reason I do, and I could show you by way of a simulation, why I do not agree with how that's explained, because it creates this narrative in people's minds, and it totally causes them to miss some of the heavier interactions of the earth that are going to affect us greatly, right? People do believe that certain places are floating. They do. Remember, they used to say that part of California is going to fall off into the ocean. How can it fall off? It's not going to fall off into the ocean. We can have crustal displacement, which means land masses can come together and start pushing other land masses upward and upthrust, right? We can do that. We can have that. We can have continents spread apart, causing these large guffs. We can do that, but it's not just going to fall off into the ocean. The ocean is simply the area where the water is on the surface of the earth. Now we go underneath the surface. That means underneath the oceans. It is one big crustal boundary. So it's like a ball with an inch-thick layer of Play-Doh around it. In fact, if you were to take a basketball, the size of a basketball, listen to me closely. Take a basketball, and if you were to cover that basketball with Play-Doh, but the Play-Doh could only be the width of your fingernail. You guys following me? If you could cover that basketball with Play-Doh, but it can only be the thickness of a fingernail all the way around the ball, then the thickness of that fingernail would represent the bottom of the ocean to the top of all the mountains. Isn't that something? And all life would be held on that tiny little insignificant layer of fingernail thick Play-Doh around that basketball. That's the crust of the earth that we live on, that we're familiar with. You start to see the scale of earth. Are you beginning to see the sheer scale of earth? So there is a misrepresentation in people's minds. They can't quite see things in a correct manner, which is very difficult for people to capture. Conversations and certain things that people talk about. Now, crustal displacement, what would that be? Underneath that fingernail, that Play-Doh, that's the thickness of her fingernail, is lava, hot rock, molten rock, a lot of it, and different layers of the earth that are, some are solid, some are not. Because if from the bottom of the ocean to the top of the tallest mountains, if it's only the thickness of your fingernail that goes around a basketball, then I'm telling you right now, there are many layers underneath us we can't even get to. That could house entire civilizations. That could have been there from the beginning, and we would never know it. We just never know it, and that still would not penetrate anywhere near the interiors of the earth. Not even near. Just so you understand that. And can you see how people could build underground facilities and it's really not a big deal? It's not a big deal. It's just not a big deal. But can you also see how other things could live? Because the actual crust of the earth, the fingernail thickness, is all of what we know about the earth. But there's a livable, I guess you could say, livable thickness of the earth that's about 2 finger width thick, right? That's about, what is that about? That's about over 90 fingernails. 90 fingernails thick, so 90 different layers. And each layer would be from the bottom of the ocean to the top of the tallest mountain. That's how thick it would be. So there could be countless things in there. That means if somebody could live on the 3rd interior layer, and they would never know about you, and you would never know about them. They would have no concept of you, and you would have no concept of them. And nobody would have ever found them, and they would have never found you. And that's something. If something were living in these cavernous regions of the earth, what I'm telling you is that for as long as the earth has existed, they could have been down there, living their lives, without interruptions from us, and we would know nothing. And they would know nothing about you. You see how that's possible? You know how they say, a lot of people start thinking about the inner earth, right? You don't have to go down that far in utilizing the scale of the earth. You don't have to go down that far to live in a civilization. Now, they have found large caverns down there, caverns that are so deep, and the top of it so high you cannot see the top of the cavern. You cannot see it. Now, they also know there are oceans suspended in between these layers. Think of that. Think of an ocean suspended in between 2 life-giving caverns in the earth. And then we have us on top. And we think we know everything and we know nothing. What if all the good stuff is happening inside the planet? And that's the right place to be. And we're in the most vulnerable part. See, we don't know these things. You could go down in a layer and be totally protected from meteors, from the sun's radiation, from everything. Living in a perfect environment where nothing could disturb it or get it out of whack. That could have been going on for some time now. And you can have up to 90 layers in the livable part. The livable part would be where temperatures would absolutely sustain life. Absolutely. Be something else, wouldn't it? Something else. Oh, and by the way, as we're talking about the interior portions of the earth, the inside of the earth, the core of the earth is incredibly hot and incredibly powerful. So by all definitions, the core of the earth emits very near the same materials as the sun does, just in a different way. I'm telling you this to let you know that, number one, we're babies on this earth. We're babies. In the scale of the earth, we've not been here but about 5 minutes. And there are other things that could have been here for years, and humans have been here for 5 minutes. Genesis is quite the book when it says, the earth was void and formless. And then when you look up that word formless, you start to find out something. Because you're saying formless. Well, how can it be the earth if it's formless and it's a void? What are we talking about here? How could you identify something that is just simply not there? Because those words mean something. Well, they mean something incredible. And when you apply what those words actually mean to the reading, well, then you start to, that's when you back up and you say, you know what, I don't know too much. That's what you'll say. I don't know too much. Walter says, how does molten iron have magnetism when iron heats up and loses its magnetism? Well, they've already had an experiment in a compressed sphere, right? And they had to, evaluate that. There's some different properties when you have iron in the presence of motion and heat, something totally different happens. Metals take on different properties at different temperatures, but motion is a big part of it, especially when dealing with magnetics. Remember something, when iron passes something, right? When iron passes any type of heat, or let's just say radioactive potential, it can mutate that potential into something else. In this case, you're talking about the movement of electrons on a large scale, right? And other particulates, but in this case, you essentially begin to create a type of, I'm going to call it a hyper dynamo. Because in fact, it is part of that dynamo effect. The motion of the earth is key. If the earth ever stopped rotating, enough that the inner core would stop rotating, everything inside the earth would die. Do you know that? Then, Walter, there would be no magnetic field. The iron acts as a brake and also a separator, causing those magnetic field lines of force to be possible in the first place, right? Think of it like a spacer. Don't think of it as the spark plug of the engine. It's not the spark plug of the engine. It's actually more like a spark arrestor. The hot magma holds enough potential to do just about anything, but hot magma by itself is just a potential. Now you begin to interrupt that potential, and what do you have? You have power pulses, essentially power pulses. Given a specific rotation with those power pulses, you begin to develop a consistent magnetic field lines of force. And then properties, they mutate, they change. Anyway, that's the simplest way I can put it for right now. Okay, right now. All right. So, with the simulation, they found out a few things. They did. Even to the direction, and this is what I want your attention to, I want you to home in on this. They found out something with the simulation, a few things about the simulation. Number one, it has a westward drift, a natural westward drift. Now, just in case you don't know, when you have particulates in motion and they're moving in a specific direction, there's something called inertia. So that's good for physical forces, not so good for, electronic or tiny little forces, right? Inertia is nullified with the tiny, teeny forces because you're dealing with these powerful nuclear forces that take effect. So not only did they find a drift, but they also found a stall factor that will take place should that drift be interrupted. In other words, just like a rotating top, right? When you rotate a top, it looks so good when it's rotating real fast. When it starts to slow down, what happens? It wobbles. Now that wobbling represents instabilities in the production of the field lines of force. Chaos. Magnetic field lines of force that are going everywhere. We lose orientation, right? The dipole effect is interrupted, and you have a chaotic magnetic field lines, some are canceling each other out. They're not uniform. And on the surface of the planet, you have penetration of the solar winds to the surface of the earth. Because magnetic field lines in chaos are very close to having no magnetic field lines at all. Magnetic field lines are effective due to their orientation. And the more you have in the same orientation, right, the more strength you're going to give to that force. Okay? But if you take that away, if you start to produce somehow, if you could produce chaotic lines of force that are going all over the place, are not uniform, it's not going to stick to your refrigerator. Not anymore. Right? Where in one moment of time, it would be orientated to stick north to south and south to north. Then some other magnetic field line would come and cancel that out, repelling it. Then you have another attracting it, then another repelling it, so on and so forth, and you have no uniformity. So it's not going to stick to that magnet will no longer stick to your refrigerator. Now, if it does this, that means all the radiation, because just in case you don't know this, those magnetic field lines of force, those pretty magnetic field lines of force, they redirect all radiation. So think of the most deadly radiation coming from space. So what? So long as we have magnetic field lines of force, those high-speed radioactive particulates are going to follow, just like a highway, those magnetic field lines of force. That's how they travel. They love magnetic field lines of force. They're going to follow those right to the poles, going into the inside of the planet, rejuvenating the heat lost as the process of the Earth continues, right? It's going to heat up the interior portions of the planet, so it didn't matter how high the dose of radiation that's coming. You can also do that to a nuclear bomb. You can effectively shield a city from any type of nuclear explosion, especially when the fallout happens. If you can redirect the dust, you got a problem with the radiation, because you can control that through very powerful magnets, like CERN. CERN has developed, I know people like these, high-speed collisions. I know that. But CERN perfected something that should be world-shattering. So let me tell you what they produced. In order to keep that beam in that little tube, right? Follow me on this. To keep that little beam in that little tube to accelerate this little tiny particulate up to a high speed, causing a beam, so you can have that collision in the first place, you need the strongest magnets ever built to guide that beam perfectly in that tube. Do you guys hear me? You need the strongest magnets ever built to keep the beam perfectly in the center of the tube. That's the only way to keep that beam in the center of the tube, is through magnetic field lines of force. So what CERN did was they built the most powerful magnets on the planet. Do you know what that means? If they were to turn CERN on, change the direction of those magnets, no longer pointing inwardly towards the tube, but outwardly, they could effectively cover a continent with magnetic field lines of force. That if we did have a killer X-ray event from the sun, solar flare event, they could protect that city with the magnets of CERN. So underneath your noses, I'm going to tell you this is my mind. Here's what I think. After seeing project after project after project, I didn't see a ton of projects, but I've been involved in a couple. But after seeing those projects, I know this for a fact, that all too often, when you have a project, it is meant to do one specific thing, but in the hubris of mankind and the pride and ego they all express, they never want to accept that they messed up. But what ends up happening is that to make any project work, you have to develop components around that main project so it can work. In CERN's case, they had to develop magnets to get the beam to remain stationary. But the greatest accomplishment were the magnets. Being involved in those projects, you wouldn't believe how many times that in the project, the outcome was supposed to be one thing, but the consequences of the developed technology to try and make this project a successful project, they developed technology that is mind-blowing. And the technology they developed to try and get the project to work ended up being the star of the show. And so they quietly, take that away. Nobody knows about that. They're thinking about the main project, when in fact, the true breakthrough was this little bitty component they built as a tool to help out the project. It'd be like the first person building a house, right? Everybody's out there with stones. All of a sudden, they got to build this structure. It's taking them too long. Somebody comes up and they invent a hammer. So they hammer away, and then when they get the structure done, it is beautiful, and everybody's mouth drop falls open because the structure is beautiful. But here's the truth. The structure is not the breakthrough. The hammer is. The hammer is the breakthrough. Nobody cares about the hammer. But the hammer is the breakthrough. That's how things actually work. In man's pride, they would like people to think that they did exactly what they were going for. No. It's always the little tool here developed, and this tool here invented, and that tool there that was created under pressure to get the project to work in the first place. That is the true takeaway. That's how we have come to know computers. That's how we have come to know all the tech that we have. It's always the little thing over here and the little thing over there that excels humanity forward. They just don't want to admit that, because no one likes to admit that their prized idea was a failure. No one likes that. There was a certain helicopter that was developed, and the only reason that helicopter was developed is so that it could aid in the transportation of something else that was being built that was supposed to be world-changing. Well, the thing that was supposed to be world-changing never came to be, but the helicopter was perfected. A specific type of helicopter was perfected. That's how things work. All right. Now that you know that, now that you know that magnetic field lines of force can redirect radiation, you should also know that mankind now has the technology to protect a city from radiation. That includes, listen, that includes your famous EMP. It's already been tried and proven. You can nullify an EMP in a heartbeat. You can do it for a city. You can do it for a country. It can be done. And that's something. But most people have not heard of that. You know what? That's abstract thinking in the first place. Very abstract. But again, here we are with those side elements being the takeaway of the century. Okay, so just to recap. You know about the magnetic field lines of force, certain parts of the interior of the Earth, how they're responsible for the magnetic field lines of force. We went over part of the scale of the Earth and how enormous things are. Right? You also know that these magnetic field lines of force can redirect all types of radiation. Weak, strong, doesn't matter. You know what happens when the rotation of the Earth, should it slow, right? Thanks to Walter, should it slow, that the magnetic field lines of force are going to reach chaos state, which means they're going all over the place, which means they're not going to redirect any type of solar winds or high-speed particles coming towards the Earth, which means the solar winds will touch the Earth and burn everything they touch, burn it up, or turn it into glass or ash, one or the other. And we also know that the dipole of the Earth, the magnetic field lines of the Earth, dependent on the orientation of that dipole of the Earth or the axis of the Earth, can randomly change whenever it wants to. It's not necessarily built on anybody's cycle, although the sun has an 11-year cycle of its flip. The Earth does not. You also learn that the sun, because the radiation coming from the sun going to the Earth, is much like the sprockets on a bike or the chain on a bike, directly affects the Earth and properties in the Earth. You know about that. So now you should be able to see the structure of the Earth, the hot stuff in the middle, the multiple layers that can sustain life, that are, remember, the fingernail and the silly putty around a basketball, right? Remember those different layers, the fingernail thick, and they constitute all of what we know about the surface of the Earth, but the Earth could sustain so much more on the interior portions that are livable before it ever gets to that true molten part. You know that for a long time we've enjoyed stability of our magnetic field lines of force. But all of that is changing. All of it is. When it changes, it'll throw off all predictive models. And of all things that humanity has perfected, CERN demonstrates through its own successes that the magnets are the prize of the show. All right, I'll be back in a few minutes right here on COT to finish this so that you can see we're going to go through the changes. And then we have to look at the Word of God to see some of those changes. Because slowly but surely we're moving away from hypothetical things into absolutes. Absolutes you can know about, so that we can have a pretty good forecast of what we're looking at. Somebody made a statement. I like the statement, by the way. They said, well, I guess if the Lord came to save humanity, but if people lived on the inside of the planet, they would know who Christ is. Sounds fair. But no. Here's the deal. In Genesis, God made it clear what mankind is and what we are to do. God gave man dominion over the earth, to subdue the earth. He didn't give us the job of subduing the heavens. He gave us the job of subduing the earth. So right here, on the surface of this planet, is our domain. If there is something on the interior portions of the earth, it's a different domain. Yes, our Father would know about it. In fact, he'd know about everything about this earth. But we were given a specific task to subdue the earth, to take care of the earth. God gave us a domain to control. A beautiful domain it is. We are to look after, we are the caretakers of this domain. And when Jesus came, he came in the form of mankind for us. We don't know any other story. We know our story. It's very important to remember. We know our story. As somebody asked me one time, they said, well, aren't you concerned about what the Vatican is saying about, that God exists for other forms of life too? I said, I'm not worried about other forms of life. I'm worried about what the Lord gave us to worry about. I'm not worried about Pluto. I'm not worried about stuff on Mars, and I'm not worried about that. God gave us a domain. Isn't it funny how we've been stuck in this domain, and we can't even get that right? This is my concern. It is the Father's business, what he has done with the rest of creation. There could literally be life everywhere out there. But what's that to do with me? It's a very thorough and tough enough job to inspire those of your own kind to see those truths of the Lord and the goodness he has upon us. And he put us back in a rightful position. But man won't accept it. In fact, God gave us a task, and man wants more. In other words, he told us to take care of the earth. We don't want to do that. We want to go somewhere else and destroy something else. Why can't we just do what the Lord said to do? That's the rebellious part of humanity. Oh, and by the way, we're made in the image and likeness of our Creator. Our Creator creates. It's in us to create, to be nosy, to look, to have to know. But God requires, and he does indeed have a standard of doing everything decent and in order. We have to finish our first task, and then perhaps he'll empower us for more. Isn't it funny how the majority of mankind is held down to this domain? Others have ventured in other places, but you have not heard about it. You don't want to hear about it. You don't. The Lord gives us, each of us, this human body to be in, right? We're still not convinced that this body knows what to do beyond us. In other words, it's carrying out general instructions from the Most High. We're in this body, and we don't know how it works completely. Yet we say we're in absolute control of ourselves. No, we're not. We can't slow our breathing down a fraction of a percent precisely. We can't increase or decrease our heartbeat on demand precisely. We can't tell our kidneys to filter out, to work about 2% greater than what it's normally working. We can't do that. We can't even talk mode. Well, some people can, but the majority of the people can't even answer pain signals. Your body puts out a pain signal, when you hurt yourself, right? That's a signal. Your imagination does the worst. So if you get hurt, but you don't perceive you're hurt, you're not going to feel the pain. Do you know why? Because you're not interpreting the pain signals. But when you look down and see a cut, you expect feedback, and that feedback is called pain. If a person could look down at a cut and say, okay, I got this, you can send your body a signal to stop sending the pain signals. Even that's hard for some people to believe who have not quite accomplished that. Pain is simply a signal. You can control that signal. All you have to do is answer the body. That's all you have to do. But the majority of the people do not know how to answer the body. If you answer the body, the pain signals, there's no need to send them. That means, yes, people, they don't have to be in pain. But due to our stubbornness, in our own programmed mind, in the way we think, we simply will not believe it is that simple when it actually is. It's that simple. It really is that simple. And again, the key is this. When you're not paying attention to something, when you don't perceive it, when you really don't perceive it, the pain signals, they're not working. Your body is trying to get your attention, but if you don't pay attention to it, it's not pain. As soon as you pay attention to it, it is pain. The day people know how to answer their bodies, many mysteries will be unlocked. They won't be doubters anymore. Then they'll see the possibilities that the Lord has already given us. But there are many people who refuse to believe in existence any other way. Say it again, though. You can answer pain signals. You do not have to be in pain. You don't. You do not. But you can't be stubborn either. You have to realize that the mechanisms of the body are a little different. You've been taught a portion of what the body does. As far as communication with the body, that's still a mystery to mankind, but not to all of mankind. Clearly, some have trained others to answer pain signals, and it's no longer pain. You can also reassign a state when in any type of pain. For example, instead of you feeling the hurt and that whatever you feel, maybe you want to smell strawberries or something. You can do that. Maybe you want to feel the sensation of water. You can associate that and recall that every single time. So instead of you falling out in pain, you're refreshed. You can do that. But I can almost guarantee that's hard for anybody to believe until they do it. Isn't that something? Okay, back to our talk, everybody. Back to our talk. So with the earth again. The earth is changing. The liquid zone of the earth, the theorized liquid zone of the earth, is let me see, it's around 5,000 kilometers or something like that. Something like that. This liquid causes a difference in temperature between the crust, or the bottom of the crust, and interior portions. Like when you boil something, there's a difference in temperature from the actual eye of the stove to the top of the water itself. It's a temperature difference. All that activity in the middle is a consequence of that temperature difference, and some physics happening, equalization happening, symmetry happening. Same thing is happening with the interiors of the earth. Everything will always try to have some sort of equilibrium, whether by temperature or pressures or whatever the case is. It will always try that. And when it does, that's a simple identification moment. In our case, this temperature difference is starting to increase in a way that is causing lots of motion underneath the crust of the earth. Pressure differences one day, they drop the next, they're back 2 days later. These differences are causing the crust of the earth to vibrate. Right, to vibrate very slowly, but it's vibrating, causing massive instabilities. Remember I told you guys that the sinkholes were coming back? And somebody said, I told you guys city-sized sinkholes were coming back. Have you guys read in the last 4 days of a sinkhole that was about the size It was enormous. But have you guys read about that sinkhole where people were kind of caught in a specific location because of a sinkhole? They're going to get much bigger. So much bigger. It was Florida, correct? You guys, where was that at? I know they had one in South Carolina. They had several in North Carolina. They had one in, they had a few in Florida. One of them was absolutely enormous. It was just utterly enormous. And everybody was stuck because they couldn't get out of a specific place, right? We're going to have a lot, especially on the East Coast. On the East Coast of the USA, we're going to have a lot of sinking places. But Florida is no exemption. Although Florida should map all of the sinkholes to let people know exactly where they are and where the mines are. Because you have water pressure on top of these sinkholes, and if they start to cave in, they're going to consume everything. Louisiana, same thing. All these coastal places have some very dangerous places. Around the Great Lakes, more of the same problem. In the Appalachian Mountains, same thing is happening. There's a portion of the Appalachian Mountains, and the base has been lost. That means at any given moment, the earth could shift in the slightest way. We have a little 1.1 earthquake could essentially cause a collapse in the Appalachian Mountains. Think of that, the oldest rock. With the earth, right now what we're experiencing is we have that temperature difference between the interior, the core of the earth, the exterior of the earth, and that can be measured. Right, beyond theoretical, that can actually be measured through a type of, by following sound waves, right? With pressure waves, with some other gadgets in between. So you can actually measure some temperatures and some electrical discharges, which, by the way, electrical discharges give away the movement of the electricity itself being generated inside the earth, and the current in the liquid core, right, gives us a clue. It gives them a clue of just how symmetrical things are, right? If it has symmetry or not, which means you have something happening on one side and the other also. Our axis is changing. Something is altering flow inside the earth. We've had increases in the flow and decreases in that flow, and they've been observable. So these differences are starting to point to certain places on the surface of the earth that are going to emit chaotic magnetic field lines of force. Which means what? If it's a chaotic area, there's no protection against radiation. No protection. Which means, yet again, the earth is going to be touched by solar winds. So the bad part is, we have too much infrastructure. We do. And you remember in the Bible, when there's a prophecy where God said, He's going to smite the horses with blindness and the rider with madness. Now that's a prophecy. But listen to that prophecy, that God will smite the horses with blindness. If a horse is a modern day vehicle, how can a vehicle be blind? No GPS. No GPS whatsoever. But that's one thing. Okay, you hit the satellites, no GPS, but that's not going to cause madness to the driver. Guess what will cause madness? A lack of the Earth's magnetic field lines of force. Remember, these chaotic magnetic field lines of force redirect radiation. They absolutely redirects it. Without that, radiation would just simply eat up everything, just like the Bible also prophesies. When an angel poured his vial into the sun, and men were scorched by reason of great heat. There's another one. So you could say that right now we're seeing the buildup of something. It's no doubt that the weather has changed, right? It's almost hurtful to see the planet burn. The USA has bad fires. Canada has bad fires. Asia has bad fires. Europe has bad fires. Even the Vatican's going to have some pretty bad fires. There are fires all over the place, and a dryness and no relief in certain areas. People have been dealing with heat They're not able to deal with it. How would you like it? There are certain places in Germany, or in Europe, that have no air conditioning. Why? Because they did not need it. Imagine being in a place that never needed air conditioning, and all of a sudden people are dying because of the great heat. The great heat. This heat is spreading. When this process continues, and it's underway right now, we should notice some things in the earth. The weather conditions, for example, that we're now seeing. For example, this rain that just came through, right? This rain was terrible. There were these small pop-up storms, but a high-pressure system of such strength literally dissolved a huge storm in less than hours because of the sheer dryness of it. That's going to be followed by a lot of heat and then no high-pressure systems whatsoever, which means flooding is coming. Everybody ought to get ready to those conditions. I can't even emphasize that enough. You're going to see the forecasts for rain on the rise. You're going to see, slowly but surely, they're going to be taken over by flooding. Do you know how many counties are in a state of emergency right down the USA because of water problems? Because their cities and the little towns within that county are taken totally out. So we have to know these things, right? It's a good way, if you know them, when you're forecasting, it's going to be on point. You'll have a good explanation as to why things have gotten the way they've gotten. Not only that, but we're all believers in Christ. But do you believe the book of Isaiah? Because if you do, then you know that these conditions of earth are going to degrade in the same way that the inhabitants of man's hearts degrade. People are hostile right now, are they not? I can't mince any words. There are people who are hostile, and many of them have already been taken over. You're not dealing with the same world you dealt with 2 years ago. That's a very in-depth explanation, because there are many different components of what you're dealing with. But I'm pretty sure that you can tell that something is happening with people also. Not all people, but something is happening with people. They are changing. You guys know people in your families. They're changing drastically. There are so many parents disassociated with their children, right? That when their children go off to go to college or go somewhere else, the parent is relieved. The child is gone. Big time. What a mercy. It will continue to get worse. We know that crime has been of a very specific type as of late. Drugs have been cut off from this nation. Now it's time to deal with the aftermath. You guys ready for that? To deal with the aftermath of that? The tie-in, by the way, people and the earth are operating by the same dynamic. As the weather and these earthquakes and everything else continues to escalate, so will the behavior of mankind go in the wrong direction. And it will not go in the direction of salvation. It's going to go in the direction of iniquity, a curse. But don't get depressed by that. All of us knew 20 plus years ago that these days were coming. But I'll tell you something we don't know. We do not know how all these things come about. We don't. We just simply don't. But now is the time that we can dig and see. Everything is in the Bible. I believe everything is in the Bible. It is. Everything God wants us to know, everything we need to know is in that Word, and given by inspiration of the Holy Spirit directly to us, so that we know the season we're in. The season we're in is a motivator. It's a motivator to identify the time you're in. You're not in some dead season. No. You're in a season of choice. Okay, now, you guys understand the dynamic of what's happening, the degradation of the earth, that we are close to some changes on the earth that not too many people anticipated. I know there are conflicts happening, and conflicts are going to continue to happen. Remember, in the Bible it says war and desolations are determined until the end. That means no peace. There's always going to be some sort of conflict somewhere. But also in the Bible it says, let the saints say so. If you're about your Father's business, you're sincere about your Father's business. Not only are you going to have your environment, you're going to know what's happening there, but you'll know what's happening spiritually. Questions, real quick. Some of the life steps that are good in life, while I'm waiting on a question, it's very good to know the forecast of what you're stepping into. Somebody says, please share the truth of what you know about the binary twin and its orbitals. Where can we get in? You can't get information on that. Except there's still some tools left. For example, Google. If you were to type in Google and type something in concerning a binary twin, but do it within a specific time span, do not use any of the current data. Don't do that. You have to put between the years 1950 and 92. That'd be a good place to start. And then look up binary twin, right? Because that was unsuppressed information. Right now, the information is just encoded, hidden, or totally taken away. Think of the implications. If somebody out there could prove we lived in a binary system, if they could actually prove that, everybody on Earth would be nervous. They'd be nervous because they would say to themselves, in a binary system, we're not dealing with chance. We're dealing with absolutes, and we will absolutely be hit by one of these things multiple times. And it's not going to be good for the solar system. And other things would come forward, and people would get nervous. It'd be too much depression and sadness everywhere, long before anything ever truly is transpired. Don't expect to know any truth behind that, except you can learn about a binary system and some of the causes that any orbiting planets would face and see what we're actually dealing with. Because it's a very high chance you'll never see the companion star. You'll just never see it. And in that case, if we never see a companion star but go through the effects of a binary system, people would still deny we have a binary twin. I don't think they'll do it this time, but you know what I'm saying. People have to see something to prove it, and it just so happens you're in a time now where what you see in the heavens, well, it's going to blow everybody's minds. Never forget you live in a time where people are calling forward to themselves what they know not. Just to explain that, why have people given names to entities and all sorts of things they never saw before, never interacted with? In this world we live in right now, people have a hunger to know. Why do they have a hunger to know? Because their foundations have been stripped away. In order for a person to live comfortably on this earth, they need some security in knowing that tomorrow is going to be there for them. There is no such security anymore. Look at yourselves, that every time you try to make a plan to do something for tomorrow, you're thinking about war. You hear some news of something pops up, right? Somebody has an earthquake, like Japan again. Something happens to cause you to reevaluate what you're about to do. Many of you you had an idea to do something, and then you sat back and said, what's the use? Time is too short. I'm not going to have time to do it completely, so I'm not going to start that. Anybody ever find themselves in that pitfall, in that mindset? I can't say it's a pitfall, but in that mindset. There's no more security in tomorrow. And although people try to prop it up like we're just totally secure, we know something different. And in fact, every time they say don't worry about something, people get paranoid. Anyway, that's how that operates. So we know prophecy, dealing with the heavens prophecy, will surely take place. We know that by faith, not by proof, by faith. We know it by faith, and we're seeing specific, or I'll say fragmented things unfold. The times are coming where all these things will fit together, but hear me on this. Imagine a time when for a fact you finally get it. You finally see it. It's finally in front of you. And many mysteries you do understand. How much time will you have wasted in hunting and debating and things outside of the Lord? How much time will you have wasted? A lot. In my case, it would be a lot. I'm sure that in many others' cases, it could be a lot. I don't want to waste time, right? I don't want to waste time. We don't have to waste time. We don't. And there are ways to see things beyond the methods you may know about. We do that collectively. I told you guys before, and I mean this with all of my heart, it's time to take most of these subjects out of the realm of mystique. Remember when the Lord said, it is not meant for them to know the mysteries of the kingdom, but it is meant for us to know. Not them. It's meant for us. God's not withholding knowledge from us, but he will not disclose critical things to the world. It's not. That's for you to know the truth. Those of you who actually chose him. It is not for those who will not choose him. And now we're dealing with war. I know we have war setting off and threats going off, and boy, that's going to be trouble within itself. But I'm going to ask you something. Do you know about the earth and its vulnerability right now dealing with the sun? And potentially what could be happening to the earth right now by way of the weather changes? Because we're just beginning the atmospheric troubles in the earth. You know, it's so funny, I spoke about this, and people have gone back and searched. I guess I'm just out of timing. But back when I was talking about these things that people would see, there was only scoffing and laughter. Only scoffing and laughter. You guys remember when I kept saying, we're going to have floods and droughts at the exact same time? You remember when I kept saying that people are going to hear about, they're going to see the forecast. It's going to be a thunderstorm forecast. And it's going to give people massive anxieties. Do you know that in the last 5 days, a lot was destroyed in the USA? You know that. For you believe, somehow, I got the inside track on things to come up with that in the first place. No, don't do that. Anything I talk about, believe it or not, it's also given to you. You know what the difference is? And this is something for everybody. Do you know what the difference is? You didn't tell me this, so I'm going to bring it out of you. Here's the difference. The Lord has given you things too. He did not give you all of it. He gave you the spark of something. And you knew you were to take that spark, to add your due diligence to that spark, with much prayer, seeking the Lord, to help people with what he gave you. The problem is this. Nobody wants to be wrong in the face of anybody else. Nobody wants to be scrutinized and everybody pointing a finger at them. Well, I'll tell you something. Me, everybody's pointing. People point a finger at me. There are many people who said back then when I said you're going to have wind problems and lightning problems and rain problems most of all, right? And wind problems most of all, and all these storms and fires. In fact, it was last Thanksgiving. What did I tell everybody? Get ready for fires and storms. Did I not say that? And the rain. In fact, I believe it's still up on our website. Somebody said I should put a timestamp on these articles. I probably will do that. Maybe, maybe not. But fires and floods. That's been up there for a long time. You know that? Fires and floods has been up there so long. It's commonplace. If you go to the COT website, you've seen it a billion times. Fires and floods. It's been up there for a very long time. What are we primarily dealing with right now? Fires and floods. Are we not? Now that I'm not smart to figure all that out. It didn't take smarts. It was something given to me. I do my best to present it in a way that can be understandable, that everybody can understand it, but that was given to me just like it was given to you. You know what the truth is? It was just not given to me. The difference is, people are pointing at me already and scoffing things about me already and giving the cold shoulder already. So what? God gave some of you things and you're frightened to come forward with it. Here's my advice to you. If the Lord gives you something, search his word out to find it and search him out to confirm it. And then do your due diligence. Rely upon the Lord to get that thing out. Everybody have that? Hopefully you do. Hopefully you do. I hope you do. We have a third element, of course. Something you guys desperately want to know about. I know you do. See, people, especially Christians, I don't want to know about this ET stuff. That's because it's ET stuff. We are going to go over that. We're going to go over that in great detail. In massive detail. So that you're not left in the dark. So that you can be an inspiration to those who are going to be hurt by this very subject. So that you can be armed with the truth in the Word of God. Not to tell everybody, they're all demons. That's not what they all are. But I will tell you this. The Lord gave us a task on this earth. And within that task, we're anointed to do the work He gave us. So let's do it. Anything of the Father will announce itself from the Father. But what are you going to do when they come out with proof? And a man looked inside of an orb that was the size of a baseball. And when he looked inside, he was inside, but nobody saw him go inside. He was inside. And what he saw inside was about the size of a continent. And what made it so believable was the tan on his face when he looked back at him, and the change of his hair, of his skin, of his eyebrows. Can you imagine a person? Somebody tells a person, hey, go look inside that baseball. Right? So they look inside, they try to look inside the baseball, and they just stay there for a second. And when they turn away from the baseball, they look like they're about 7 years older. Now, nobody ever saw the person go anywhere, but everybody saw that the person was 7 years older. Everyone saw the lines in their face deepen, the gray in their mustache come out, the hair grew longer. Everyone saw it. Wouldn't you be interested to know what that person saw? It's hard to believe something like that, but people will end up having to contend with things like that. They will. This world's going to be upside down. The Lord said that even the prophets are going to have their mouths stuck open. They'll have no answer for what's happening. None. Whether you know this or not, as time continues, stability will be taken away. Now, stability also means order. God's order. God's order will be eliminated from certain places. In the absence of God's order is chaos. The potential of anything and everything, and many things will be a lie. It's not going to be the truth. It's going to be a lie. Do you hear me? Many will be fooled, and all these things will be shown to them to do what? To get them to turn away from Christ before the great and notable day of the Lord come. And I'm praying you never give up. Anybody have any questions of me? Clearly, I'm going to have to do another part to this. I don't want to overload you guys. It'll sound like rubbish. Oh, by the way, listen, concerning the rest of the world, yes, there are high threats underway right now. I'll get some together so I can speak about them soberly, responsibly. But there are some threats. I'm going to encourage you guys to do something, though. I'm going to encourage you to do something. Many of you want to protect your families. You do. You want your families protected. Can I give you my personal advice that always messes people up? There's a reason the Lord sustains me. There's a reason I bounce back from so many things. There's a reason the Lord still uses me. In your heart of hearts, the Lord gave you some things you're to be loyal to. The Lord gave that to you. Nobody else gave it to you. The Lord did. Be loyal to what the Lord put inside of you. Stop second guessing what the Lord put inside you. Whatever the task is, let it be released. Whatever the Lord gave you to do, stop holding back, because as you hold back, so will your Father hold back. Don't let your life turn to this dull thing. And you guys know what I'm talking about. Your excitement is gone. Your direction is gone. The voice of the Lord is hardly there. And it feels like things are dying in your life. You do not have to be that way. I keep going because what the Lord put in me, I will not hesitate to do. And I've been in a fight of fights here lately. You guys wouldn't believe the fight I've been in. But I'm not depressed. I'm quite excited. Because I know how the Lord works, and He can double the efforts of one for the sake of many. I always seek for Him to instill in me the motivation to continue to go forward in His name. Don't hold back on the Lord, The Lord has given you things you already know, and so many people are holding back. And for what? What are you holding back for? Here's what's going to happen to some, and I pray it didn't happen to you guys. I know it's going to happen to some. Some people are going to hold back on something the Lord clearly gave them instruction for because they're unsure. Then that day of days is going to come, and they're going to have to deal with the consequences. And then they're going to remember, I held back when I shouldn't have. Instead of acting on the word of the Lord, I saved it for another day. And I shouldn't have. I should have trusted the Lord to act when he gave it to me to act. You'd never really realize the impact you can have on everything when you do things in God's timing. Me personally, if I do something of my heart, it can have some impact. But if I do something in the timing of the Most High, my goodness, he exponentially increases the impact so much. It's unbelievable to hear what happened on the other side. Unbelievable. Don't hold back. That's in so many believers right now. They're holding back they don't know what they're holding back for, but they're holding back. No. Don't hold back. Be obedient in all ways. And don't hold back. Because if you hold back, you're going to stifle your own life. You could potentially ruin what your Father has set up for you. And while everybody else is seeking God's mercy, those who listened to their Father and acted in the freedom of their choices towards and for him, they will not be scared during those times. Where everybody else is running around, whoever it is that obeyed the Lord will sit in confidence with the Lord's peace upon them. Not peace as men have peace, but something so much greater that no nervousness will be within you. None. You have that opportunity right now, right before things break out. God always gives an opportunity to people in a somewhat duress time. That's when it happens. Please remember this. To act on the word of the Lord is he never wants us to do that in an opportune time. He wants us to do it when it looks like we can't or we shouldn't. Do you hear me? Look at your own life and tell me I'm wrong. God has always spoken to his children when it looked like they couldn't do what he was calling them to do. And all they had to do was simply act. If a person would act in that little time of controversy, of crisis, of when they can't think right, or can't see something right, can't trust the conditions, whatever the case is, when they act in obedience during that time, that's the time you sow the greatest seeds you'll ever sow in your life. Because that same time always comes back again. And for some it will take, but for others it will cover. A storm will come, and for some that storm will ruin everything about them. But for others, it will secure and protect everything that is theirs. Do you know that? A tornado, it does not only come to destroy. Do you not know that tornadoes, see, they won't tell people these stories. This is going to sound wild. But do you not know the people who have gained relief from tornadoes? You may say, how? I tell you right now, it's funny. When in close proximities, neighborhoods and stuff like that, sometimes a nightmare can live right beside you. You guys ever hear that? You ever have a neighbor that's a menace? You ever have a situation with a family or some kids with your kids? Look at something all the way, not halfway. The world is always going to see it as this tragic thing, because you got your own tool set to investigate what you need to investigate. Because when you start finding out the facts, you're not going to believe in them at first. You're going to say, there's no way. This is the outcome of that. The world is going to see it as awful, horrible, horrific. And indeed it is in many cases, but I'm telling you, deliverance is also found in that. There have been so many people liberated from killers, from people you just wouldn't imagine the situations. We're trained to see a situation as horrible. I know a person who got in a car accident. And the car accident was awful. The person was hospitalized for half a year. In that half year, because the person was hospitalized, the one person who tormented her life walked away because they did not want to stand and help somebody else out when they couldn't do for themselves. Isn't that funny? What this person couldn't get free of themselves, God delivered them from. And then the person, not more than 2 weeks after that, went out and murdered somebody. When you begin to look at something, the whole picture of what's happening here on the earth, the whole picture, not half of it, not the part that's popular, not the part that just naturally catches your eye, but when you look into a situation, you're going to find out things are not what they seem. They're not what's being advertised. Like some of these news agencies. I don't know how they are now, but when I used to watch the news, they would say, we have this big story coming back, and we're going to talk about how so-and-so had did so-and-so. And then you stick with the news and never hear the story they said was coming on. You stayed to hear the story they said was coming on. But when they come back, they never talk about it. Anybody ever do that? And then you say, wait a minute, where's the story at? They didn't cover the story. That's what happens when you see these events in the world. They look bad from the onset, and it looks like you're presented the truth. But there's a hidden half, the half nobody talks about. There were some children saved, more children held hostage, saved by a tornado. What was that, 3 weeks ago? When the house was torn down, the children were freed from their prison they had been in for 7 years, 4 years, or something like that. Look at the whole thing. Now, why wouldn't they publicize? They don't publicize things like that. They just simply don't do it. They don't do it. There are people who are, let me give you a small example. There are lots of people who are careless with automobiles. An automobile is a weapon on the road, isn't it? So if you're careless with that weapon, you can kill yourself, seriously maim yourself and somebody else. Young ladies get in accidents, and it wakes them up to what that car really is, to how blessed they truly are. Because normally when they get in an accident and the car is totaled, they have a newfound respect for the car. Because let's go ahead and face it, sometimes when you're dealing with young ladies, you tell them something and they say, well, I'm going to do it my way anyway because I have to get to work. I don't have any time to check this out, check that out, and have this checked. I don't have time for that. Then something happens. They got all the time in the world. But they're woken up to the fact that, hey, if you do not check the systems on this vehicle, something could malfunction while you're driving and kill you and somebody else. But the only way to wake us up is to jolt us awake half the time. It's kind of like preventive maintenance. Gentlemen, how many times have you tried to explain to another person that if you change the fluids in the car on schedule, that car's going to last a lot longer? But they'll say, well, I couldn't do it because I would miss the sale. And what they're doing is they don't understand that the entire car can blow up. And then I promise you the sale they were trying to go to is not going to mean a thing if their car is blown up. It's like I'm going to use an example. Now, nobody's going to know what I'm talking about except the person, but it's like a person having a tree hovering over their house. And you know storms are coming. And the person says, well, you know, I can't afford that tree to come down right now. I can't do that. Well, why not? Well, because I got to fix the sidewalk. They don't understand if the tree comes down, that's the end of their house. They're going to have nothing but a sidewalk left. They can't see that part. That happens all the time. That's how we operate. Is that not how we operate? So listen to me. With these things that happen, see the whole thing. Not the piece of it, see the whole thing. Look for the promises of your Father in everything that you see. Don't stand around and say, well, I wish I could just see some good works of the Father. You have a computer. You have the ability. Find out the whole story. Don't hold back in what the Lord has dropped within you. Whatever He put within you is do or die for somebody else. Never forget that. It's do or die for somebody else. It is do or die. In these times, be obedient. It will be a blessing beyond belief to someone. That you will. Be obedient. Don't do like I did so many years ago. Not act on the Word of God and see the end result of that. Don't end up that way. Don't ever end up that way. That is not a good direction to go into. When the Lord would show you what you could have helped in preventing, But because you didn't obey him in that moment, you didn't deem it important, and you didn't know it was tied to so many people, that a bad outcome took place on many. Please don't end up in that position. That's what happened to me one time, not twice, once. One time that happened to me, and it never happened again since. All right, everybody, clearly, we're only through a little piece of this conversation. I'm going to let you guys let all that sink in, because there's another area I have to go into for you all. Somebody says, Mike, can you create a timeline as you see it, Return of the Fallen, binary? Nope, I don't believe there's a Return of the Fallen. I don't believe that. The Fallen never left. They never left. They've been with you this entire time. They don't have to return. They've been here, and they've been working. And what they've been doing has been prospering. If it didn't prosper, there is no beast kingdom that would ever rise. Think about that. But we know in prophecy, the kingdom of the beast rises because all the pieces were put into place. They never left. They have been working this entire time. That's a midnight hour topic, isn't it? COT's base of operations is right here at thecounciloftime.com. COT has no other outlet or venue. These are other folks who will rebroadcast. Anything COT does is by the main page here at thecounciloftime.com.
Also in the last days perilous times shall come, for men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers. It takes the grace of God to change us, folks. How can you be saved if you're not willing to repent? And the Lord Jesus Christ said, except you repent, ye shall all likewise perish.